The cabin lights flickered once, just long enough to make several passengers glance up. And Rebecca Hale felt her pulse jump, as if the jetliner itself had warned her that tonight would not go as planned. She had boarded expecting silence, luxury, and control. Instead, she found herself trapped beside a man who looked like he belonged anywhere but in a business-class seat on an intercontinental flight. The shock came not from the turbulence outside, but from realizing her perfect world had been invaded by someone she did not consider worthy of sharing her row. Rebecca's displeasure sharpened the air around her. The Los Angeles to Geneva night flight had barely leveled off when her gaze locked onto the oil-stained collar of the man beside her. His hands were rough, his shirt lived in his posture, tired yet upright. Emily, the little girl, curled under his arm, squeezed closer to him as the jet nudged through a pocket of unstable wind. Her voice, soft and trembling, drifted upward. "Daddy, is the plane supposed to shake like that?" He lowered his head and whispered something soothing his tone, steady in a way that irritated Rebecca even more, as if he were comfortable in a place he did not belong. "I paid $10,000 for this seat," she muttered loud enough for nearby passengers to hear, "and I end up next to a mechanic wiping baby formula from his shirt." A ripple of restrained laughter shimmered in the air. The man, Michael Grant, did not rise to the bait. He simply offered her a polite nod as if he had endured far worse than her irritation. That subtle calm unsettled her more than an argument would have. It was the composure of someone who knew how to survive storms, not someone who serviced them from a hangar floor. Rebecca shifted away, crossing her legs sharply, her white designer dress grazing the armrest. She had grown up in penthouses and boardrooms, groomed since childhood to inherit the Hale aviation empire, and she carried that superiority like a second skin. She saw people in categories, essential, useful, or irrelevant. And to her, Michael fell squarely in the last group. Yet something about him refused to fit the narrative she had built in her mind. His silence was too thoughtful, his stillness too controlled, his gaze too aware of every sound the aircraft made. It was infuriating. Emily, oblivious to the tension, peeked at Rebecca with wide, earnest eyes before returning to her father's side. "Daddy flies planes really well," she said proudly. The statement struck Rebecca like a pebble flicked at a glass wall, small, laughable, but annoyingly persistent. "Flying a jet is not the same as playing a video game," she replied with a dismissive wave, not bothering to look at Michael. She expected him to shrink, to apologize, to disappear into the background, the way people in his job usually did around someone like her. Instead, he offered a faint, almost sympathetic smile that felt like an insult wrapped in patience. The flight attendant approached with a tray of wine, and Rebecca seized the moment to reaffirm her position. "Your most expensive bottle," she said, as though the words were a weapon. "I need something to distract me." She shot Michael a pointed glance, letting the implication drip like venom. But he remained unmoved, gently tucking Emily's blanket around her shoulders, as if the world's judgment meant nothing. When the jet rocked again, a deeper tremor this time, several passengers inhaled sharply. Rebecca's grip tightened on her glass, her knuckles paling. The lights flickered once more, and a faint metallic groan echoed from somewhere beneath the floor. Michael lifted his head, listening intently, not with fear, but with recognition, the way a musician hears a wrong note in an otherwise familiar song. It unsettled her. Why did he seem to understand the aircraft's heartbeat better than she did when she grew up surrounded by the aviation world? She tried to mask her unease with arrogance. "I do not need you to explain turbulence to me," she snapped, when he offered a calm, factual reassurance. But the irritation in her voice hid something she refused to acknowledge, the creeping suspicion that she had misjudged him. That perhaps he was not the simple, small life technician she had assumed. As the jet sliced deeper into unstable air, Rebecca caught a glimpse of his expression. Not fearful, not confused. Focused. Ready. A strange feeling threaded through her irritation, a sense that this man, this stranger she had dismissed within seconds, carried a weight she had not yet recognized. A weight that did not belong to a mechanic. A weight that demanded respect. She looked away quickly, refusing to let the thought form. She had no idea that before the night ended, the truth about Michael Grant would tear through her world like a lightning strike, exposing the one plot twist she never saw coming. And the man she mocked might be the only person on this aircraft capable of keeping her alive. 5 years before the night flight, that would expose everything Michael Grant had lived a life balanced between sky and home. A life that felt carved from sunlight and purpose. Back then he wore a flight suit instead of an oil-stained shirt, carried a call sign instead of a toolbox, and stepped into an F-16 cockpit with the quiet confidence of a man who trusted both his training and his instincts. In those days, he was Captain Michael Grant, known across his squadron as Raptor 7, a pilot whose name carried weight far beyond the hangar walls. His fellow airmen often joked that he seemed born with wings, but the truth was simpler. He had earned every inch of his reputation through grit, discipline, and a relentless devotion to duty. His life had been full then not merely because of the military career he cherished, but because of two people who made every landing worthwhile. Sarah, his wife, had been a civilian flight instructor with a laugh that could cut through exhaustion, and Emily, their little girl, had turned their small home into a sanctuary of bedtime stories and toy airplanes scattered across the living room floor. Michael had flown dangerous missions before dawn and returned at dusk to Sarah's arms and Emily's delighted squeals. The contrast never failed to humble him. Combat in the morning, pancakes in the evening. Fear in the skies, joy on the ground. He knew he was lucky. That luck shattered on a mission etched into military records under a cold, sterile name, Operation Desert Beacon. The objective had sounded straightforward enough, a rescue extraction deep in hostile territory. But missions often disguise their true nature behind briefings. Michael and his wingman, Colonel Robert Hale, had taken off under a moonless sky, guided only by instruments and the faint hope that they would bring an injured soldier home alive. But the desert had teeth that night. Enemy fire tore through Robert's aircraft, forcing him into a spiraling descent. Michael's own jet suffered hydraulic failure moments later, alarms flashing like furious warnings, yet he stayed with Robert, talking him through emergency checklists, refusing to abandon the man whose daughter would one day mock him on a luxury flight. They both ejected at the last possible second. Robert landed safely within friendly lines. Michael did not. His parachute dragged him across jagged rock, shattering his left leg in multiple places and jarring his spine so violently that even the medics flinched at the first X-rays. The rescue team found him unconscious, bleeding but alive. When he woke in the military hospital, he learned two impossible truths: he had been medically grounded, and Sarah had been killed by a drunk driver while driving home after visiting him. She never saw the headlights that ended her life. Emily, only a toddler, then lost her mother before she understood what loss meant. His days of flight were over, and his nights were spent comforting a grieving child while confronting a future stripped of everything that once defined him. Discharged with honors, yet burdened by injuries, Michael moved into a modest apartment near a civilian airfield. He sought work that allowed him to stay close to the machines that had shaped him, eventually taking a job as an aircraft maintenance technician. It paid little, but provided enough stability to keep Emily safe, fed, and loved. He learned to smile through pain, to kneel beside her without showing the stiffness of his spine, to endure careless remarks from passengers who never imagined the man checking their landing gear had once soared above combat zones. Rebecca Hale, groomed by privilege and insulated from consequence, never knew any of this as she judged him from her comfortable seat in business class. She never imagined that the man she considered beneath her had once risked everything to save her father's life, sacrificing his own career in the process. She certainly did not know that Michael still carried the ache of loss like a hidden scar woven through every breath he took. But soon she would, and the revelation would strike with the force of a falling aircraft. The first sign that something was wrong arrived not as a violent jolt, but as a quiet, unnatural shiver through the metal bones of the aircraft, as if the jet itself suddenly doubted its ability to stay in the sky. Michael felt it immediately. His posture stiffened, his senses sharpening with the old, instinctual awareness he had tried for years to bury. The overhead lights dimmed, flickered, then steadied again, but the brief darkness rippled through the cabin like a whispered omen. Emily clutched his arm, her small fingers tightening in fear, while Rebecca's expression hardened the veneer of indifference, cracking just enough for uncertainty to show through. The captain's voice emerged over the intercom, weary and strained, the tone of a man fighting to sound calm while monitoring a dozen warning lights. He announced turbulence routine, turbulence. But Michael heard something else in the cadence, the kind of tightness that meant a pilot was buying time, not offering reassurance. The aircraft lurched again, sharper now, drawing gasps from passengers. A flight attendant braced herself against a seat back, her eyes darting toward the cockpit with a flicker of alarm. Michael tracked everything, heart-quickening, mind-mapping possibilities the way he once had in a fighter jet. Rebecca attempted to mask her rising anxiety with impatience. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, gripping her armrest so tightly her knuckles blanched. "Night flights are supposed to be smooth. They said the weather was clear." But the tremor in her voice betrayed her. She glanced at Michael, expecting to see panic or confusion. Instead, she saw a calm so steady it unsettled her more than the turbulence itself. He was listening again, the same deep, focused listening she had noticed earlier, as though he could hear what the aircraft wanted to tell him. Then it happened. A sudden drop, a violent plunge that ripped a scream from the cabin. Oxygen masks shot down with a mechanical hiss. Luggage thudded in overhead bins. Emily's cry tore through the chaos, and Michael pulled her close, shielding her with his body. The lights flashed again, settling into a dim emergency glow that cast the passengers in a pale, fearful haze. Amid the panic, Michael felt the aircraft yaw slightly, a subtle deviation that told him the situation had shifted from discomfort to danger. The intercom crackled back to life, but this time the captain's voice trembled with naked urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, the co-pilot has lost consciousness. We need immediate assistance in the cockpit. If there is a military-trained pilot on board, please come forward at once." The words fell like a stone into the cabin. Silence followed, heavy, breathless, containing the raw truth that none of the passengers had expected such a moment to demand something extraordinary. Rebecca looked around wildly, searching for a savior among strangers. No one moved. Panic crawled up her spine, unraveling all her practiced composure. She whispered, almost pleading, "There has to be someone." But the stillness answered her. The businessman beside her stared at his shaking hands. A young woman clutched her partner's arm, sobbing. No one stood. No one answered the call. Except Michael. He eased Emily back into her seat, pulling her oxygen mask gently over her nose before fastening his own. His voice was soft but certain as he spoke to her. "Sweetheart, I have to help the pilots. I'll come back." Emily nodded bravely, though tears trembled in her eyes. She trusted him without question, sensing the shift in him, sensing the strength returning like an old friend to its familiar place. Rebecca watched in disbelief as he unbuckled his seatbelt and rose. He did not look like a mechanic now. He did not look like someone beneath her. He looked like a man stepping into the role he had been crafted for, a man shaped by sky and fire and impossible choices. When he spoke, his words carried authority that echoed through the stunned cabin. "I'm Captain Michael Grant, United States Air Force, call sign Raptor 7. Gasps rippled through the aisles. Recognition flashed across the face of a former serviceman seated near the rear. "Raptor 7, he whispered, awestruck. "Sir, you're Raptor 7. Rebecca felt the floor shift beneath her in a new way, not from turbulence, but from revelation. The man she had dismissed as unworthy had a history that could rewrite the fate of everyone on board. And tonight, whether she liked it or not, her life rested in the hands of the very man she had judged the moment she laid eyes on him. Michael stepped into the narrow aisle with a steadiness that contrasted sharply with the rattling aircraft around him. Every instinct honed from years of combat flying surged awake, overriding the life he had built on the ground. The passengers parted instinctively, sensing the shift in energy as he moved toward the cockpit. Rebecca followed him with her eyes, her pulse pounding with a realization she could not name yet. She had spent the entire flight dismissing him. But now the truth pressed down on her with undeniable force. This man carried an authority no luxury seat or corporate title could mimic. When the cockpit door opened, the captain's face appeared drawn tight with fear and exhaustion. He stepped aside quickly, relief breaking across him like a sudden sunrise. "Thank God," he breathed. "We heard the call sign, but I didn't dare hope." His voice trailed off as Michael slid into the co-pilot's seat, already assessing the chaos displayed on the panels. Warning lights pulsed like frantic heartbeats. Altitude fluctuated. Hydraulics wavered between life and death. Michael's strapped-in hands moving with a familiarity that felt both foreign and deeply natural after so many years away from the sky. "Tell me what happened," he said, voice steady but urgent. The captain swallowed hard. "Electrical surges began right after we hit that first wave of turbulence. Then the co-pilot collapsed. We're losing partial control of the rudder. Air traffic control hasn't responded in over 10 minutes. Michael nodded, absorbing every detail. "We divert. Geneva is too far with this instability. The closest safe landing is Ramstein Air Base. I know the runways. Contact their tower on military frequency." The captain hesitated only a second before obeying. Hearing someone else take command eased the terror gripping him. Michael's demeanor did that. He carried calm the way desert warriors carried canteens as something essential for survival. As the aircraft jerked again, Michael gripped the control column, guiding the plane through the dip with precision that left the captain staring. "You still fly," the captain murmured in awe. "I never stopped in here," Michael replied softly, tapping his chest. Meanwhile, outside the cockpit, Rebecca hovered by the door, clinging to a hope she barely understood. Through the small window, she saw Michael transform entirely. This was not the quiet man seated beside her. This was someone forged by battle, someone who had once kept her father alive in a desert half a world away. She felt her breath catch as the truth tightened around her. She had mocked a man who had earned a level of respect she could not fathom. In the cabin, Emily sat upright in her seat, holding her father's jacket to her chest like a shield. Her small voice whispered to herself, "Daddy's doing what Mommy taught him." A flight attendant paused at her side, touched by the child's brave composure. Inside the cockpit, Ramstein finally responded, their controller sounding stunned when Michael identified himself by call sign. "Raptor 7, is that really you? Affirmative?" Michael replied, "We're coming in heavy and unstable. I need the main runway cleared. It's yours, as the tower answered without hesitation. Emergency crews are mobilizing. Good to have you back even under these circumstances. Michael felt something tighten in his throat but forced it down. He could fall apart later. Not now. Not with hundreds of lives depending on him. Rebecca watched him with growing astonishment as he stabilized the descent, calling out commands, with a precision that steadied even the panicked captain. Each word carried certainty. Each motion carried memory. The aircraft, tortured moments before, gradually responded like a frightened creature, soothed by a familiar hand. As the runway lights of Ramstein appeared through the storm-torn clouds, Rebecca felt her world tilt in a way that had nothing to do with turbulence. She realized she was witnessing not just skill, but a man returning to the sky he had once lost. And she understood with a sinking blend of regret and awe that she had never known who Michael Grant truly was until now. The jet struck the runway with a forceful but controlled impact, the kind of landing that revealed the impossible balance between disaster and salvation. For a breathless moment, no one in the cabin moved. Then, applause erupted like a breaking dam, raw and frantic, a wave of relief sweeping through the shaken passengers. But Michael did not celebrate. He remained in the cockpit for several steadying breaths, hands still gripping the controls, as if letting go too quickly might allow the fear buried inside him to surface. Only when the captain whispered a shaken thank you did he unstrap and rise, the weight of responsibility pressing hard against his spine. When he stepped into the cabin, the applause crescendoed. Passengers stood reaching out to touch him, thanking him with trembling voices. But Michael scanned only for one face. Emily rushed into his arms, burying herself against him, sobbing with exhausted relief. He held her tightly, his eyes closing, the scent of her hair grounding him more deeply than any runway ever could. When he opened them again, Rebecca stood nearby, frozen in a mixture of shame, awe, and something softer she did not yet understand. "Thank you for trusting me," Michael said to the cabin, though. His voice remained gentle. A man in a business suit responded loudly. "We didn't trust you at first, but we sure do now." Nervous laughter followed. Michael offered a small, polite smile, one that hid more pain than anyone could imagine. He never enjoyed being the center of attention. Heroics were not something he wore comfortably. They were simply what he had been trained to do. Rebecca waited until the crowd thinned before stepping closer. Her voice wavered. "I didn't trust you at all." Michael shrugged lightly. "No one forced you to." She stared at his wrist, where the faint wings tattoo showed beneath his rolled sleeve. "That symbol. It belongs to the Raptor Squadron, doesn't it?" He nodded once. Understanding struck her like a physical blow. "My father flew with Raptor Squadron. Colonel Robert Hale. He used to tell us stories about a pilot who stayed with him for hours during a desert rescue. The one who saved his life. He said that pilot lost his own aircraft because he refused to abandon him." She swallowed hard. "That was you?" Michael looked away, uncomfortable under the weight of her realization. "Your father lived. That's what mattered." Rebecca's voice cracked. "And I called you worthless." Her breath trembled as she added, "I mocked the man who saved my father. Twice." He shook his head gently. "You didn't know my story." "That's not an excuse," she whispered. "I should treat everyone with respect, no matter their story." Emily looked between them and then placed her small hand in Rebecca's. "Daddy says everyone has a story. You just have to listen." The child's innocence softened the moment, and Rebecca felt her throat tighten. In the sterile lights of the military hangar with emergency crews still sweeping the runway behind them, she suddenly understood the depth of the man she had spent hours underestimating. Days later, the world would learn his name, News outlets broadcast the dramatic emergency landing, calling him the Raptor 7 hero hidden in plain sight. Photographs captured him carrying Emily down the aircraft stairs, while Rebecca trailed behind him like an assistant instead of a CEO. The Hale Aviation Board demanded answers, and Rebecca stepped forward declaring firmly, "The man who saved my father years ago saved me again. Our company owes him more than we can ever repay." Yet Michael retreated from the spotlight, preferring the quiet of his modest apartment. When Rebecca visited, Emily greeted her at the door with a crayon drawing of an airplane and the words, "My daddy is a real pilot." Rebecca knelt, touched by the child's unwavering pride. Rising to face Michael, she made her offer. "We need you. Hale Aviation needs you. I want you to be our flight safety advisor." Michael hesitated, glancing at Emily. "I just want peace for my daughter." "Then I'll build the job around your life," Rebecca promised. "Family first, always." Her sincerity stunned him. For the first time in years, he felt something shift inside him, something like possibility. But he said nothing yet. Healing required time and trust even more. Still, Rebecca could sense that the door had opened, even if only a fraction. And she intended to earn her way through it. The offer lingered in Michael's mind long after Rebecca left, but he pushed it aside, determined to keep his world small and safe for Emily. Yet fate had a way of circling back, testing him at moments he least expected. Only 2 weeks after the emergency landing, he brought Emily to the Hale Aviation Test Facility for a promised tour of the new Falcon X prototype. She bounced beside him, clutching a toy plane, unaware of how sharply life was about to twist again. The morning began quietly, engineers moving through their routines as the sleek silver aircraft prepared for a controlled systems test. Rebecca was scheduled to observe from inside the prototype, a decision she defended despite her staff's protests. She wanted to understand the technology her company was about to unveil, not simply sign papers from a distance. Michael noticed her through the observation window, offering a polite nod. Their connection remained fragile, shaped more by shared crisis than trust, yet there was respect now, fragile but real. Then, alarms shattered the calm. A technician shouted that the prototype was no longer responding to onboard commands. The aircraft, though still grounded, had activated its autonomous systems and sealed its doors, trapping Rebecca and 2 engineers inside. Panic swept the hangar as the Falcon X lurched toward taxi mode, its engines spooling with a rising, ominous whine. Emily clutched Michael's sleeve, fear wide in her eyes. He reacted before thinking. Years of dormant instinct roared awake as he sprinted toward the control tower. Bursting inside, he seized the microphone, his voice firm and commanding. "This is Raptor 7. Patch me into the Falcon X cockpit immediately." The room fell silent. Engineers exchanged stunned looks, but obeyed, their hands flying over consoles. When Rebecca heard his voice crackle through the cockpit speakers, she gasped with overwhelming relief. "Michael, I'm locked in. The system isn't responding. I can't stop it." "You will," he answered. "You're going to follow my instructions exactly." The test crew gathered behind him, drawn by the sheer force of his presence. Once again, he was the steady center in a storm of chaos, guiding the aircraft inch by inch back into safety. And once again, he was saving Rebecca Hale's life. The hangar quieted only after the Falcon X's engines powered down, and the aircraft rolled to a halt under Michael's command. When the doors finally opened, Rebecca stumbled out, shaken, breathless, but alive. The moment she saw him standing beneath the tower lights, a flood of emotion broke through her composure. She moved toward him with none of her usual grandeur, only gratitude and disbelief. "Fate called," she whispered, voice trembling, "and you still answered." Michael simply nodded, his calm gaze steady. The sky still needs people who keep their promises. But beneath that exchange lay a deeper truth neither spoke aloud. Rebecca had nearly died, and the man she had once mocked had saved her again without hesitation. The weight of that realization pressed heavily on her in the days that followed. She returned to Hale Aviation's headquarters with a new purpose burning inside her. A need not merely to thank him, but to transform the culture that had blinded her to the value of people like him. As she reviewed internal records, she uncovered a pattern she could no longer ignore. Former military personnel scattered across the company occupied roles far below their capabilities. A former fighter pilot working as a baggage handler. A Special Forces veteran assigned to routine security patrols. A former avionics expert scrubbing fuselages. Men and women with extraordinary skills, invisible inside a system that treated them as disposable labor. The discovery struck her harder than turbulence ever had. These people were not underqualified, they were unseen. She convened an emergency board meeting, standing in the center of the glossy conference room, with a conviction that surprised even her. "We are failing veterans," she declared. "We are wasting experience, wasting lives, wasting dignity. This ends now." Some board members scoffed, citing budget constraints, lack of credentials, risk exposure. Rebecca silenced them with a single line delivered with icy clarity. "The man who saved my father, who saved me, who saved hundreds of passengers, does not have an MBA. Yet he has accomplished more than all of us combined." The room fell still. Her reforms passed. Hale Aviation launched a veterans transition program, created new pathways for certification, partnered with military bases, and reshaped hiring practices from the ground up. At the center of it all, she appointed Michael as Director of Flight Safety and Veterans Affairs. When she informed him, he hesitated, torn between humility and responsibility. "I don't know how to run a department," he admitted softly. "I was a pilot." She met his gaze with unwavering certainty. "You still are, and you will learn, just as I am learning to be better. The company will fit around your life, not consume it. Family first." Michael studied her for a long moment, recognizing the sincerity that now shaped her choices. She had changed, and though he was not ready to step fully into the future, she imagined he found himself willing to try. 3 years passed like a long, steady climb through thinning clouds, each moment, lifting Michael, Rebecca, and Emily toward a horizon none of them had imagined on that turbulent night over the Atlantic. Hale Aviation had transformed into the industry's leading employer of former service members, its culture reshaped by compassion, respect, and an unwavering belief that experience forged in hardship held immeasurable value. At the heart of this transformation stood Michael, now Director of Flight Safety and Veterans Affairs, a role he fulfilled with humility and quiet authority. His office became a refuge for those navigating the uneasy shift from uniform to civilian life. Veterans sought him out not because of his title, but because of the way he listened, as though every story carried weight worth holding. Rebecca often found him counseling someone long after sunset, guiding a former airman through applications, or helping a retired mechanic rediscover confidence. She admired him from a respectful distance, aware that her feelings had deepened into something she could no longer deny. One evening, unable to carry it alone, she confessed the truth. "I know I was terrible to you," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve anything, but I love you. And I needed you to know." Michael held her gaze with quiet kindness. "I know," he said softly. "Emily told me. She sees everything. But I'm not ready yet. I'm still healing from too much. I need to be whole before I can be anything to anyone." The word stung, yet Rebecca nodded, heartbroken, but understanding. "Then I'll wait," she said. "Not because I should, but because you're worth waiting for." They continued forward, not together, not apart, building a bond shaped by trust, respect, and time. When Hale Aviation unveiled the new Hale Falcon 7 aircraft designed with direct input from veteran pilots, Michael was chosen to command its inaugural flight. Rebecca had earned her pilot's license through relentless training, and now she would serve as his co-pilot. Emily, 10 years old, wore her junior pilot wings proudly as she found a seat in the cabin. As the aircraft began its roll down the runway, Michael felt a peace he had not known since before Sarah's death, a peace born not from erasing loss, but from rising with it. The wheels lifted the Falcon 7, climbing into an expanse of perfect blue. Air traffic control crackled through the speakers. Raptor 7, beautiful takeoff. Welcome home. Michael smiled, answering with steady warmth. Good to be home, Tower. He looked over at Rebecca, focused, and composed her hands, firm on the controls. He glanced back toward the cabin, imagining Emily watching clouds streak past her window sketchbook, ready to capture the sky she loved as fiercely as he once had. As the jet pierced deeper into the afternoon light, Michael understood the truth his old commander had once told him. Being a pilot was never about machinery or rank. It was about refusing to let gravity in all its forms win. It was the courage to rise after losing everything, the grace to forgive, the strength to trust again, and the quiet belief that every person carries a story worth hearing. Emily's voice floated from the cabin, bright as sunrise. "Daddy, are we flying high enough?" Michael smiled. "Not yet, sweetheart," he murmured. "But we're getting there." And for the first time in years, he felt he truly was. In the end, Michael's journey reminds us of a truth too often forgotten. Real strength is rarely loud, and true leadership is born not from titles, but from character shaped in darkness and revealed under pressure. His return to the sky symbolizes the resilience within every person who has ever fallen and dared to rise again. Stories like his challenge us to look beyond appearances, to honor those who serve quietly, and to measure worth not by status, but by sacrifice. If this story moved, you consider liking and subscribing, so more people can encounter tales that illuminate the hidden courage around us. And before you go, share your voice in the comments with a simple phrase that captures the heart of this journey. Rise again.